As I've said, my name is Ryk van Niekerk. We will talk about the auditing profession in the country. And this broadcast is live streamed on the Moneyweb website. That's moneyweb.co.za, on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. Now, as I've said, auditors are critical in our economy, in our financial sector. And the industry has always been really well respected. Even the World Economic Forum has regarded our auditing profession to be the best in the world. But there were a few corporate scandals, there was state capture, and these events did take the shine off the industry a bit. And today we will look at where the industry is at, what are the challenges, and what are the opportunities. Now, I've got a very, very esteemed panel. Anoop Ninan is the co-CEO of Mazars in South Africa. Imre Nagy is the acting CEO of the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors, or Irba. And Freeman Nomvalo, the CEO of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, or Saica. And I really also want to to hear from the audience, from listeners. Please type in questions on the platform you are watching, and it will be relayed to me, and I will put it to the panel. So we've got a voice from the industry, and we've got the two regulators, their CEOs, to participate today. But Anoop, I want to start with you. You recently wrote a very interesting article about the state of the auditing industry, and you expressed a lot of concerns of what is happening. The one part was there seems to be a significant skills shortage, and you also said technology has changed the way many auditors and audit functions work, and not always in a good way. Can you maybe frame your article and what your concerns are?
We face as an industry, and this is a global issue, is a skill shortage. And I think it's precipitated from many things. The one is the pipeline of students that we get through from the universities, which has obviously been impacted by COVID and some of the results, which has led to less trainees that we're getting into the industry. And then we have an outsourced model. So, as you said, the South African auditing profession and accounting profession is one of the best in the world. So there's a lot of international companies who have this massive skill shortage, and they look to South African students, South African auditors, to go an outsourced model basis. So they take people straight out of articles and they work remotely, work from home, to virtual clients in the USA and Europe, all over the world. So that also takes away some of the skills that we need and capacity that we need locally. And then the third big issue is, we have immigration and the skills drain that's happening in the country. So I think these three things are causing capacity constraints. And as an industry, we need to look at that. We need to address it. We need to go back to the days, as you said, we were the number one. I got into this profession because, it was a very prestigious profession. It was something that everyone aspired to be a CA, and we need to bring that back. So I just like to frame it around that. I feel that we have a lot to discuss as an industry. As much as there are some scandals, there's also been a lot of work that's been done by the firms, and also a lot of fraud and forensics investigations have actually been done by the audit firms. So there's a lot of positivity, and we need to look at that as well.
I just want to get a sense of where you think we are. So let's say 10 is we are the best auditing, or we've got a best auditing function in the world. Our auditors are the best. We have a lot of skills. Say that's 10 on the scale. And number one, that's an absolute crisis. The auditing profession is imploding. Where on that scale do you think we are currently?
Look, I think it's very difficult to get to that number, but what I want to just emphasize again, this is a global problem. So I would say that even just by looking at the requests we're getting as a global firm for skills, this is something that is a big challenge globally. We need to resolve it. We need to actually, in my mind, spend a lot of time on promoting the profession. promoting the benefits, promoting what has actually been done correctly. So, yeah, Ryk, very difficult to put a number on where we are, but maybe as we talk, we can maybe unpack it a bit.
Okay. Imre Nagy, you're the acting CEO of Irba, the regulator for auditors. How do you see it, and what are your responses to what Anoop just said?
Thank you, Ray. Good morning to my fellow panelists and to the viewers. Thank you for the opportunity. So I think to give context, I think there's a little bit more that we need to maybe look into and maybe take a step back instead of looking at a scale. I would say looking at the track record of audit regulation in the country, just briefly. For the benefit of the viewers, is that corporate failures is not a new phenomenon. About 20 years ago, Enron happened, the biggest energy company in the United States happened and gave rise to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And many other countries followed suit, implementing similar legislation, and including South Africa. And we received our Auditing Profession Act back in 2005, which established the independent audit regulator, and that we superseded the previous body, the old PAAB, or Public Auditors and Accountants Board, which was a self-regulatory body. So rolling forward 15 years, we continue to see corporate failures, unfortunately. But as Anoop has said, it's a global phenomenon. We are seeing global failures, Carillion, Wells Fargo in the UK and in the US, and locally we had African Bank and SAA, which we concluded our investigations on, but still busy with Steinhoff and Tongaat. And it raises closer to what Anoop is saying, is the question is firstly, what has changed since 2001 and what else do we need to change? I think we all agree that a lot has changed in the environment that pose new risks to investors since 20 years ago. So new challenges such as state capture, the deterioration of moral compass and ethics that threatens the entire country, let alone the financial reporting ecosystem. And the auditing profession is by no means into that. We have the Zondo reports coming out. We have load shedding again today. We have COVID-19. We have crime. And these things are all contributing factors to delistings and immigration of skills as a result. Maybe just a bit of statistics. We're well aware of the impact of all these things on the country, but looking only at auditors now, we are not oblivious of the fact that factors impact on the attractiveness of the auditor brand and the reputation of the profession. And our numbers have steadily dwindled since 2017. Our number of registered auditors in the country has reduced by 14%, currently standing at about 3,650 auditors. And we closely monitor the movement in this. And yes, Anoop is 100% right. We see quite a number of immigration as a reason for deregistering as registered auditors. Although auditors are not obliged to provide us with reasons when they resign, but many of them do indicate in their resignation notices that it is due to immigration. It is a concern.
Yeah, it's. I'm going to put the question to you now. Maybe you can answer it later again from a scale to 1 to 10. Where do you think we are?
I think the trust deficit is at an all-time low, exacerbated by the continued failures globally and locally. I really don't think it's appropriate for me to put a number there, but it's low. The trust deficit in the auditing profession is at a low point.
Freeman, your thoughts? We seem to have frozen. Freeman seems to be frozen. Freeman, can you hear me now? Let's see if our team can get him back. Anoop, let's interesting comments. How does the trust in the industry affect the operational aspects of the industry?
Yeah, so look, I think, of course, we've had to try and rebuild the trust, and as firms, we've put a lot of effort in that. So there's been significant amount of time that we've spent as firms, leadership, dealing with culture, increasing the awareness around independence, ethics, etc. So, I think there's a lot of additional training and time that we've spent as leadership in the industry, um, which I suppose is mainly internally focused. And perhaps it's time to also not forget that we need to also market the profession
Yeah.
and get people in.
Freeman, what are your thoughts on the industry, the skill shortage, maybe the perception of trustworthiness?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that. The view that I take is that the success of the profession since it started as a profession in the late 1800s, early 1800s, has got a lot to do with the trust that society bestows on the auditors. And when that trust is broken, it creates an impression of a crisis, because when you really take a closer look, it's a few individuals that have had impact in a few corporations where such failures have had a much bigger impact on society. And therefore, our success has created a scenario in which when we don't live up to that expectation, even if it's just a minute number in the group, it then creates this feeling of desperation and that the profession is failing as a whole. I think the profession is still sound. I think the profession still has a number of very, very good and upright individuals. What we need to do is to make sure that, to the extent that the few that causes the problem does do that, we create mechanisms that enable us to hold them accountable and hold them accountable as quickly as possible. Problem with retributive measures is that they require a lot of due diligence and so on in conducting, because otherwise lawyers come in and then it doesn't make a regulator effective if you take people to task and fail. So I would say that the profession is still sound. We've had huge reputational damage as a result of the corporate failures that we've experienced. But we do need to take a step back in understanding these issues. Anoop talks about skills shortage. Yes, and Imre is confirming that by actually quoting the numbers. And we need to ask ourselves that, is the environment in which the auditors operate, the regulatory environment, as corporate failures happen, different regulators required to update their regulatory instruments, update their regulatory approaches, and by doing so, they then come back to this very same profession for assistance in ensuring that the information they are looking at is helpful and helping them. But also regulators like Irba, who are concerned about the integrity of our capital markets, would like to see a profession that is sound, a profession that can be trusted, and so on. And they respond in a way they know how in dealing with those issues. And then the question we've got to ask ourselves is, to what extent are the instruments that we are using enabling a better regulatory environment or contributing negatively to the regulatory environment? Because it is that regulatory environment that may determine whether, once people qualify as chartered accountants and eligible to become registered auditors, they will make that choice. And this is not to ask for a loosening of the regulatory environment, but a critical assessment of that environment to see whether it enables us to attract people, because we need auditors for the integrity of our capital markets. Yes, technological changes are changing the landscape in which this sector operates, but I think they are still absolutely critical to make sure capital markets operate and operate well, but also to enable other regulators to do their work. So I think, yes, there are skills issues, but we need to dig a little bit deeper so that we understand. The global appeal of our professionals is something we should welcome, because it says even though we slipped through the ranks in terms of the ranking of our auditing standards in the country, we still are held by decision makers in very high regard. So that slippage that we've experienced isn't a true reflection of the state of the profession in the country. Actually, the demand for our professionals globally tells us that actually we are doing something right in developing and ensuring that the profession is run properly in the country. But we then need to make sure that we continue to attract more people to make it sustainable.
Freeman, can I ask you just to lower your microphone slightly? We've got a bit of a feedback, and I think that will help. Thank you. As I understand it, the key problem we have is we produce sufficient numbers of CAs for the local market, but they disappear before they become experienced auditors. And you know, I don't think you get the CA qualification and then you're one of the best auditors in the country. You need to experience. You need to be in a so-called trench and work with other experienced people. So that begs the question: why do young CAs rather go overseas and don't see that the local market is as attractive, if not more? Anoop, let's start with you. You hire many of these people. What is your experience?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the issues are right now. There's obviously this big shortage globally. So again, when you have this big pull from Europe, the Netherlands, etc., it's a lot easier for our CAs who are very marketable to leave. And I think the issues of the country have also pushed them that direction, and that is a big issue. Work from home right now. There's a lot of virtual work that's being done globally. So we, for example, are seconding quite a lot of staff into Europe on international jobs, and it's making life a lot easier. And I think that's the technological advancement. However, there are also some outsourced models where auditors are being they're being seconded into international jobs for different audit firms, and really it is a virtual platform. So the auditors will be working virtually. I think one of the big challenges with that is that it's they pay significantly more, because obviously it's a euro based or a dollar based, so that's a big attraction for people. But the challenges there are actually doing very, I would say, third year work or similar, so basically ticking and bashing work. They're not managing teams. And I think we all know that as you become more and more qualified and more experienced, that managerial skills is what makes CAs. That's the real value in us, is that we are able to seamlessly integrate different parts of the accounting profession: tax, internal audit, governance. Those are really big things that I feel with these new models that have come out, we're going to lose some of those skills, and we are going to probably have less capable managers. And when I say that, a lot of the CEOs that we have on the stock exchange and in South Africa are CAs, and they're CAs because they have very well-rounded ability, right? It's not just one-dimensional. And I think that is one of the challenges with this new outsourced model that's a global initiative that's happening. And I'm concerned that, yes, I do say I appreciate that South African CAs, we are creating jobs, we are creating employment, but it is taking away from our ability to create leaders for South Africa. And I think those are important things. This is a longer term sustainability issue that we need to look at as a profession.
Are you seeing young CAs who've left the country, gain some experience in New York and London? Do you see them coming back?
So we are seeing, and again, maybe to clarify, the outsource model, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are living in New York or the UK. You're working from home on international jobs. So very different. We're already seeing a lot of those come back because they are understanding that the longer term career progression is not what they thought it is. And I think that's really important for us. If we want to develop deep skills, ability to look at businesses, CEO type material, leaders, we need those people back into our market.
Imre, you're from Irba. Obviously, you would like as many auditors as possible in the country. How many auditors are there, and how significant do you think is the shortfall?
Yeah, Ryk, as I mentioned, we currently have about 3,650 registered auditors on our books. That number has sort of stabilized over the last 2-3 years. So the reduction of 14%, some might mention immigration, some might mention going back into commerce, so meaning that they would go back to work at a bank or become a CFO in a company, as opposed to being an auditor. But we've also seen a good influx of new auditors. Our model is based on the CA process. So up to a certain point, Saica facilitates the exams for becoming a CA. But at some point, an individual needs to decide: do they become a general practitioner, a CA for commerce, or do they actually want to specialize in becoming a registered auditor? So yes, that pipeline has been there. We've seen quite a stable influx of that. But I just want to mention something. I think Anoop touched on something very important here. When we look at auditors, these are people that are already highly skilled. They've completed their articles. They have a professional. They hold both a CA, SA qualification as well as a registered auditor license. And if they indicate immigration, it means that they actually leaving the country to go and live and practice or they leave to work in another country or live in another country, as opposed to secondment. When you look at the lower level of staff, I think Freeman and I had a discussion not too long ago on this around the youngsters. We see maybe COVID opening up the borders and through the use of technology, youngsters can easily join and be seconded abroad and get a year or two of experience without actually leaving their current residence as in South Africa. So I guess it's quite a complex thing. You have to slice and dice it differently for I would say the upper end of the professionals that leave, and then the others, you could say the engagement teams or the lower level staff that are still in training to gain the necessary experience elsewhere. It might also be an issue of getting the right opportunities in the country. It goes without saying. I mean, Ryk, everybody knows that there's delistings happening on a constant basis, and I mean that means that there's one less national listed entity that requires the skills of accountants and skilled CFOs. So it's very important that we actually look at doing some research around why auditors and CAs and even trainee CAs are looking across the borders.
Yeah, I've got a few questions that came in, and I must say the tone is generally negative. I'm going to go through them. I think that we can identify the themes and maybe address it. There is Gazapi asks, what is the root cause for the dissatisfaction in the profession? Rainer van Zyl says, the last statistics I saw, only 43% of registered CAs are registered to sign off assurance engagements. Zamunu asked, or states, there are many accountants affiliated to internationally recognized professional bodies that can't be accredited by Irba. Is Irba protecting Saica members by having an almost exclusive relationship? And then Martin Dion Rousseau says that the fact that there seems to be a bias in the market to obtaining your articles at the Big Four is a higher bar to clear and priced in the market, even though there is no difference. Let's just stop it there. If I can sum it up, there are concerns about the way auditors are regulated or managed, or how they're being, how they fit in with the regulatory system within Irba and Saica. Are you concerned about this? Have you heard these type of questions? Freeman, let's start with you.
I think the best thing we can do as Saica.
Can I ask you just to put your mic slightly closer to your mouth this time? Maybe there we go.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah,
is that good?
Maybe slightly lower, and then I think we're fine. There we go.
And I've tried that now. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, thanks.
So I'm saying maybe the way to think about this is that where Saica is concerned, our single determination is to make sure that we develop professionals that are ethical, that are competent, that can adapt to different kinds of environments, hence the update of our competency model to take into account behavioral competencies, enabling competencies, as well as technical competencies, so that we produce a well-rounded professional. And when you produce that well-rounded professional, you make life relatively easier for a regulator like Irba, although they still find a lot of issues that they want us to improve, make no mistake. But we have got a single determination to make sure that what we produce are people that can enable our economy to function well and our capital markets to function well. And that is important. And if that then meets with the requirements that Irba puts in terms of the type of professionals that they need and whatever improvements that they may require, we're very, very pleased to have that. And that can happen for all the other professional bodies as well. I don't think Irba is married to Saica only, but Irba puts out whatever the requirements that they require, which we must fit with. And so that for me is an important issue. And that underlines as well the appeal of the professionals globally. Yes, you do find the few that spoil that picture, but we have to constantly work on that throughout. I'll stop there for now.
Imre, your response?
Yes, I think I concur with Freeman. Maybe just to add. One of the other global professional bodies is the ACCA. We have received an application from the ACCA to be accredited, and we're busy with that process. We have a committee that is looking at whether the ACCA meets the local requirements. And as what's been said earlier is that CAs are and RAs from South Africa are highly regarded globally. We, for example, would get requests from, for example, the UK to want to enter into reciprocity agreements with us. They already have reciprocity agreements with Saica, so they do recognize the CA profession in other countries. I think there's a few additional exams or requirements that they need to meet, but overall, South African CAs and RAs are very highly regarded, but at the moment the RBA accredit Saica as a professional body. There's no other professional body currently accredited, but we are looking to accredit maybe one or two more professional bodies, such as the ACCA and some other bodies that we have received applications on. So that would increase our pipeline of professionals that can choose the registered auditor qualification. Maybe just an earlier point that you also made is that of the 3.5 auditors that we have, yes, about between 2,000 and 2,500 of those auditors are actually signing audit opinions. But it's always been like that. We've always had, you could say, academic registered auditors called non-assurance. Individuals such as myself working at the regulator. I'm not practicing at the moment, but I qualified as a registered auditor. Similarly, you would have lecturers and individuals in commerce that would like to retain their registered auditor status, but they're not actually in the current job that they are in. They are not auditing per se. But yes, that number of auditors have remained quite stable over the period, over the last 2-3 years, to service, I believe, the need of the country. And I think one thing to mention is that we have lesser audits. One of the phenomenons of declining economy and companies delisting, etc., closing down, is that there's one less company that requires an audit. So I think the ratio at this point of new companies being registered that requires an audit versus those that are coming off the register is something to also consider. So yes, just one more point around what Freeman is saying is that there's a lot of perception, especially in the public domain, around the value add of the audit profession. And yes, by far the majority of international investors that we talk with still value the work that the auditor is doing and the opinion that the auditor is doing. But yes, it is unfortunate that one or two failures could or does cast the entire profession in a bad light. But we have to focus on the positive as well. In that, in South Africa, the South African regulator, for example, we are currently a member of the International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators. It's a body of independent regulators of 54 countries. And we're currently a board member, and we've just been re-elected last year for another 4-year term, which goes to show that globally there's high regard for the RBA. And yes, we work very hand in glove with our international counterparts, standard setters, etc., to find out what has gone wrong and what sustainable solutions do we need to implement to restore confidence in the profession and regain our former glory as one of the top professions in the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation at the moment, because if you play soccer and you get sent off for foul play, the whole game of soccer is not tainted. If you're an engineer and the bridge you've built collapses, not all engineers are tainted. But there seems to be a perception, because of what happened during state capture and what happened at Steinhoff, what happened at Tongaat, what happened at EOH, it's tainted the whole industry. Why is that the case? And why do people perceive it as such? I don't know who wants to take that. Anoop, you look as if you have got a clear answer to that question.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I don't have any clear answer to that question. Look, I do believe, like as Imre and Freeman said, our job is about trust. Everything is about the trust that we provide into the financial market. So when these scandals happen and when there are these issues, there's always a question mark around what happened and where were the auditors. I must say it's not very clear to me that there's enough been made about the management team, the internal audit functions, the board, etc., etc. Because actually, if you think about it, it's a whole ecosystem that needs to be looking after governance. So it is something that, one thing that we understand as the audit profession is that if there's a perception, it's up to us to deal with that, and up to us to figure out a way to bring back the trust. And I can't overemphasize enough that there's a few people that have, and a few companies that have created this reputational issue, which is definitely something that is making our profession less attractive. I'm not sure how else to phrase it, that we need to get the public perception to think bigger than that. And I do think there's a lot of work being done through the Directors Institute and right across the board on internal auditors, that the non-execs would take more responsibilities, the JC. So I think there is a lot more accountability across the board, which I think will also help us and the profession as a whole.
Freeman, Saica has come under pressure. Saica has come under a bit of criticism for being very slow, at least that is the perception, or was the perception, to act against Marcus Jooste, Anoy Singh and a few other CAs. And that was also maybe seen as, the industry not acting against its own. How do you foresee rebuilding the trust, which seems to be, I think the problem seems to be bigger than many people think. How do you rebuild the trust in something like a very, very good qualification, which is highly sought after around the world? That perception can be really, really damaging. It seems like Freeman can't hear us. There seems to be a link. Imre, from Irba's perspective, maybe can you comment on that?
Yes, Ryk, I think we should. We're venturing into the question around the financial reporting ecosystem. Okay, sorry, Ryk.
You can continue. I can hear you.
So I think we're looking here at the ecosystem, and the auditing profession forms part of the financial reporting ecosystem. So I think if we take a step back, as Anoop has mentioned, there are a number of role players in this financial reporting chain. And as you mentioned, Ryk, directors and audit committees, those are the management, are the decision makers, and who's primarily responsible to run the operations and compile the financial statements. Auditors comes in often after the fact to issue an opinion, but I think what we've started to see here happening and recently is that there seems to be accountability across the board in the ecosystem. It's not only the auditors that are being looked at anymore. I think investors have recognized that the misconduct and the fraud, etc., happens on a daily basis in the running of the company by those directors. And unfortunately, the auditor is not there at the time when those decisions are made. And if they are, then they're obviously in breach of their role as an independent auditor. But yes, I guess the ecosystem is something that we need to look at. There's a lot of gaps, I believe, in the South African context that we need to look at. For example, we don't regulate accounting bodies. All those other accounting professional bodies in the country are not regulated. And we have, as the IRBA, put forward proposals to the Minister of Finance in 2019 for comprehensive regulation. And regulation goes with detect, deter, enforce, discipline, etc. So at the moment, Saica has those powers for their members, but holistically, we don't have the authority as the RBA because our mandate only extends to the 3,500 auditors and not to the accounting bodies. But yes, there's certainly gaps in the ecosystem that needs to be looked at. That we need to talk to a number of role players and stakeholders in this ecosystem to come up with solutions that will be sustainable for us.
Now, there are several questions regarding regulations, but you can't regulate someone to be honest. There's a big difference, I think, correlation between increased regulation and increased red tape, and that makes audits a lot more expensive. Freeman, I don't know if you can hear me now. Anoop, just from your side, obviously you are in the industry. How do you regard the approach and the way Irba and Saica are handling this whole issue, the perception and the trust deficit type of issue? Are you happy with how they handle it?
Look, I think as a profession, we're all in this together. So, I think from a point of view of, Irba's role as a regulator, which is directly in line with the global regulator standard. So, we're very happy with what we need to do. We understand what we need to do. And again, we can't have shortcuts because we would end up with more scandals. So it's really important now for us to clean up. And I agree with you. But if you think about the new standards that are coming, it's all about managing the quality monitoring, so monitoring system. So which is where we as firms are now spending more time around what type of programs do we have to monitor and manage early warning issues. So culture has been a big, big issue. I think that we've all spent a lot of time in the last, I would say, from 2018 as firms, talking to our people, re-emphasizing that, being a CA or being a RA is about integrity, ethics, independence. So we go back to the values that we always had. And you're right, we expected that to be anybody who comes into profession to know that, and it seems that if you don't emphasize and re-emphasize, and look, as a profession also we've been growing, so there's a lot more people that have been coming in, so it is a case of us re-emphasizing that. There are a lot of initiatives that have been put in place, and I think Freeman can talk about that to rebuild the trust in the profession. So I think as a body, Saica and Irba are really doing what they can do. We are supporting them as senior partners in the program. But I think we just have to figure out, what's the next step, because we need to adapt. We need to see where we're going. We need to say, okay, have we done enough around that? We need to rebuild the trust, because I think that is also part of the reason why we don't have enough students coming through universities or students coming out of the schools who say, I want to go the CA route. So maybe that's some of the things that we need to talk about.
Yeah, trust is earned. I think that is clear. Or in this case, it needs to be re-earned. But we've got about 15 minutes left. Freeman?
May I reflect on the issue of the delays and the initiatives to rebuild trust? First, on the issue of the delays, an organization like Saica, which is a non-governmental organization, doesn't have powers to subpoena or to force the acquisition of information during the investigation phase. So that makes life difficult. So what then needs to happen to overcome that is better collaboration with regulators where possible without breaking the law, to ensure that some of the powers that the regulators have can be brought to bear, because the objective is the same. We want to create better integrity for our capital markets. So if there's better collaboration between Saica and the other regulators, JSE, the Prudential Authority, FSCA, Irba, and so on, we can then find ways in which some of these issues can be speeded as much as we can. But like I said at the beginning, all retributive measures do take time, because you've got to make sure that you cover all the bases. It weakens the regulation if you do not succeed in prosecuting cases. And then the other issue is about that of trying to close the expectation gap. For instance, there are issues that we need to engage the media on so that the media understands our processes and how we operate. We've had to review our bylaws that govern how we execute the disciplinary processes. We have to emphasize the training and the upskilling of our members on ethical issues, on how they should respond or behave when they are faced with ethical dilemmas. And these are all the initiatives that we put in place in order to make sure that our members know exactly what to do when they face these dilemmas. But at the same time, that we need to deal with the few that breaks the code, then we're able to do so and do so relatively quickly. But it does take time, unfortunately, for these initiatives to bear fruit.
We've got about, let's say, 15 minutes left. Let's talk about solutions and what needs to happen to make the South African auditing industry more attractive and to keep skills. Over the weekend I spoke to a newly qualified CA, and he just can't stop talking. Well, he couldn't stop talking about the offers he received from the UK, from the US. He feels the world is at his feet, and South Africa is not even mentioned. And maybe money has something to do with it. A young person who maybe be exposed to New York and where everything in the finance world happens. I believe that is a very, very difficult problem to solve. I don't know if it can be solved. So I don't know. Are there any initiatives, or how should Anoop, you need really good CAs in Mazars to ensure that you provide a really good service. That's probably the challenge for all auditing firms. Imre, you need a good base of members to ensure that auditors are doing their job in South Africa, and that they actually ensure that corporate governance is at a good level. And Freeman, you need to produce and regulate how many CAs enters the market, which is also, all of that I think forms a chain, and it's an ecosystem. Imre, I don't know if you want to start. What is the solution, and how do you think we should approach it?
So I think, Ryk, just to look at this, we've covered the environmental scanning. I think there's a number of factors that can prompt anyone to decide to look abroad for work. As I've said, I think that there's some opportunity maybe for some research to be conducted to find out the real reasons, prompting individuals to leave even early in their careers, and some that are already qualified that are leaving. I think what from an RBA perspective, as I mentioned, we only regulate auditors. So CAs qualifying and staying in the country or moving abroad is something beyond our scope as a regulator. But from a regulatory perspective, one thing we need to maybe address first of all is perception and awareness around the role of the auditor, where the auditor fits in the lines of defense of a company. So that awareness and is something that we are working on. We have a new 5-year strategy that I'll just highlight the 3 main points for the next 5 years. But as the RBA, we implement international auditing and ethical standards. And the international boards have also responded significantly to failures in the global arena. So that we have bolstered standards. So, for example, in December this year, our board already approved the international quality management standards, which will replace the old quality control standards. And this new standard is much more robust in terms of how the audit firm governs itself, and how it positions itself through policies and procedures to have the right audit quality, the right people, the right skill, and the integrity and ethics that is necessary to be the auditor. So there's new standards underway. The profession is preparing for that. It's a very, very big change in the standards, how a firm manages quality. And then we've also recently updated our code of conduct for auditors. Also stemming from the international standard, it was revamped back in 2018, and it's strengthening areas of independence. It's strengthening areas of objectivity and professional skepticism. And it's an ongoing process. So yes, it will take time for those things to be implemented. And it's important that the firms embed those principles throughout their organization. One of the things that we believe is really critical to restore confidence is that we cannot afford to continue to see audit failures. And yes, a business failure is not necessarily an audit failure, but an audit failure is where there's a business failure and the auditor, for whatever reason, doesn't either pick it up or report on it, either being negligent or being part of it, which is unthinkable. But I guess auditors, as regulators, Saica, and all the role players in the ecosystem need to pull their weight to make sure that the controls are in place and the risk is managed to an appropriate level. Because we just cannot afford to have another audit failure, especially at a public interest level. So from our side, we hope the new standards will, once implemented, will yield fruit. We have mandatory firm rotation that we've put in place that will break some of the firms having audited their clients for over 100 years, to break that perceived independence relationship and open up the market a little bit for other auditors to come in. So with all those tools that we've implemented since 2017, including transparency reporting, and we have our new act that was enacted by President Ramaphosa last year, April, which significantly strengthens the IRBA's independence and our own enforcement powers. For example, the upper limit of our fines is now removed. So we're not no longer limited in terms of what we can fine auditors if found guilty, as per our old act. So our strategy, Ryk, is for the next 5 years is to focus on the sustainability and the resilience of the IRBA and the auditing profession in the country, with a very strong focus on audit quality with leadership and other stakeholders in the ecosystem. We need to recognize where are the gaps, even if it's beyond our mandate, where are the gaps in terms of comprehensive regulation, where are the gaps in terms of legislated governance, and of course accountability that we strongly support as a regulator, where those that hold offices of trust, be it an auditor or a director, if you found guilty of fraud or misconduct, there should be consequences, and professionals should think twice before they make themselves part of such illicit activities. But we are working hard on it. We're not doing it alone. We benchmark internationally, and we are looking forward over the next couple of years, starting in the next 6 months with some quick wins with our stakeholders such as Saica and our leadership of the firms to talk about solutions that we desperately need to rebuild trust and confidence in the auditing profession.
Anoop, I just maybe want to narrow it a bit. Is this not merely a situation of there are more opportunities in the rest of the world, the money is a lot better, there are problems in South Africa which limits opportunities because of low economic growth and other regulations, and it's mostly your younger CAs who may be inclined, and it's easier for them to actually just go overseas. Is that not? How do you address that?
Yeah, so I think I can tell you what we're doing as a firm. It's obviously something that we're competing with a global market effectively, so the first thing that we are doing is it's about recognition. So besides, I know salary is one thing, we've looked at that across the board, but it's more about recognition for people of what they've done. So we have many different programs. I'll tell you, one of the big things about being a CA, coming to the profession, is we are here to develop people. And I think it's a really massive thing for many of our people to have that fulfillment. So those are some things that you won't get in an international market. And a lot of our people are staying here in order to develop. The other thing is we've started creating other capacity. So capacity outside of just auditors. So we've developed IT audit capacity, data analytics capacity, forensics capacity, and we try and create more capacity in the entire audit team so that they are able to have work-life balance. I think that's a big issue. And the one thing I can say is that the long hours, whether it's here in Europe or the USA, it's still there. So we have to find something that is a competitive advantage. So we've looked at that. The third thing is culture. So one of the big challenges through COVID was trying to build culture in a remote environment, and it's very difficult to do that. It's challenging. It can be done. We've had many different ways of doing it, but that's what keeps people. That's what keeps people not only to the country but also into a firm. So building culture was a massive thing, and those are three of the initiatives that we've been working on. And I think the fourth one is that we've looked at flexibility. So remember, hybrid work is here to stay. So, if that is what it is going to look like going forward, we need to introduce that back in. So we are at a point where we have our teams working 2 days a week at the office or at clients, and rest at home. So I think it's all these small things that we have to do to create the value add for our employees to stay here, not only in South Africa, but in the firm.
Freeman, just the last word to you. I think it's a really poor business model for South Africa to produce some of the best CAs in the world and then we ship them offshore. It's expensive to train a CA, and it is a difficult problem to solve. You probably see that with medical doctors, you see it with engineers and the like. But what do you think is the solution?
Ryk, I agree that losing CAs to international markets isn't an ideal situation. But the flip side of producing professionals that have global appeal is that they will be demanded globally. And that obviously changes the inflation reference point for audit firms locally, and which changes also the attitude that those that receive audit services need to think about audit and actually understand the intrinsic value of audit and remunerate auditors accordingly. And then I'm not suggesting that that will change the picture only, but we also need to think about, if you think about last year's results of the APC, which is the exit point for chartered accountants, people that become eligible to be auditors, we have a phenomenon in South Africa where the pass rates of between Africans and whites the gap is too big, and in a way that doesn't seem to suggest a scientific logic to it. And we need to understand, we need to dig and understand that feature, because the growth is going to come from African chartered accountants going forward. You're still going to find growth from the white community, but the reality of our country is that you've got the majority of people being African. You don't want to change anything in the manner in which people qualify, but understand the dynamics. What are the things that are driving the disparities that we find, and figure out ways in which to address those. But I would really still emphasize that we do need to continue to produce professionals of high quality, and the consequence of that is that they will be demanded globally. And then we need to figure out ways, as Anoop was saying, and also Imre alluding to think about the regulatory environment, to think about the environment within firms where they are appointed, to see in which there are things we can do to retain them. But produce professionals of high quality, we must.
In many ways, it is a good problem to have, but unfortunately, I think South Africa is the party who doesn't benefit as it should be. A very, very complicated problem. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your participation today. Anoop Ninan, co-CEO of Mazars. Imre Nagy is the CEO, or the acting CEO of Irba, and Freeman Nomvalo, the CEO of Saica. Thank you for your participation. I think we will pick this up at a later date. I think it's a critical topic, but I think we've discussed a lot of the core issues, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryk, and thank you, colleagues.
Well, that was a very interesting discussion. That's the end of this Moneyweb Live broadcast. And hopefully we will have a lot more of these. And please check the Moneyweb website for more information.